I want to start my sermon today with a disclaimer.
Okay.
You're already laughing. Why? Even though the topic of this sermon is laughter and humor, this is, and I'm serious now, this is not a stand-up act. This is a sermon. It says so in your order of service. Thank you. Yeah, I'm telling them. And you may have noticed that we're in a church on a Sunday morning, and that's often what we do here, is we have a sermon. And I tell you this because I don't want you to expect too much and get halfway through the sermon and be thinking, well, this isn't funny. Because like most sermons, this one's about life, and human life is often sad. And one of the things we talk about at church is what to do when things get sad. In fact, one of the defining characteristics of human life is that everyone dies at the end. And I don't want you to get to the death part of the life sermon and be thinking, well, now this really isn't funny. So I apologize in case that was why you came here today, but no, we're having church, as per always. You know, while we're here, while we're alive, for however long we're lucky enough to be alive, sometimes life is really funny, or absurd, often absurd. It's one of the best parts of life, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's an important part of a religious life also. I don't think you can have a true religious life without laughing at life once in a while. Now, I think religion often gets a reputation for being a stuffy and serious place, which it sometimes is, because this is where we have funerals regularly. But I also think that laughter might be so integral to a religious community that we just take it for granted as something we do at church. And so in the hymnal, there's not a whole lot of hymns or readings about laughing, I think because we're just doing it anyway and don't talk about it. And I think about this topic a lot, as you could probably guess, because I like to laugh. I was raised in a very funny family. And I like to laugh especially in church, and especially when times are tough. But I don't laugh at everything. Some things are funny, some things are not funny to me. I don't like to laugh at people. I don't like to make fun of people or the things that they love. So I looked into this, and humor scientists, which exist, have also looked into what makes something qualitatively funny. Neuroscientist Robert Provine from UMD has written a book titled Laughter, a Scientific Investigation. The only title I can think of that would be less promising might be Laughter, a Religious Investigation, which we are doing now. Be that as it may, Provine and other humor scientists now believe that what makes something funny is that it has two qualities, and I'm totally on board with this explanation. The two qualities of something being funny are that it's benign and also threatening. Weird, huh? So it's called the benign violation theory. So something happens that violates our expectations. We get surprised in a way that could be threatening. We're a little bit scared, but it turns out to be harmless or benign, and then we laugh. That's the benign violation theory of humor. And I know breaking it down this way might be ruining humor for you, but I am ruining it for a reason, like usual. Because I find that this theory can shed some light on who we are as people, depending on what we find funny. What is it that you're surprised by? And what is it that you find harmless? Now, this explains why people tripping, falling down, or getting knocked over is one of the most enduringly funny happenstances in human society, but only under certain conditions. When you see someone trip over a step, it's surprising. It's a little bit frightening, which is the first part of the equation. That's the violation part, right? The violation of expectations. But we don't laugh until what? they get up. We don't laugh until they get up and we find out that it is benign, that it's harmless. If someone trips and they stay down, we don't laugh. If someone trips and they're very old or they're very young, we do not laugh. It's not harmless. We can't laugh. We laugh to let other people know that things are going to be okay. Provine says that we laugh on average 30 times more around other people than when we're at home by ourselves. So it's not something that we learn in society, though. Babies who are born blind and deaf and have never seen or heard another person laugh still do it reflexively when you tickle them, which indicates that laughter is hardwired into our DNA and our neurology, which also indicates that it might be critical to our survival as a social species. Among its other benefits, laughter helps communicate to our companions what is and is not a real threat. So if your friend jumps out from behind the sofa, or Brad jumps out from behind the piano and scares you, as soon as you see that it's just Brad and not a tiger, you laugh. Laughing at jump scares, as they're called in movies, is almost uncontrollable, and I mean neurologically uncontrollable, because without it, humans living and hunting in small bands might mistakenly attack and kill an innocent target. So they might think that it's a cougar behind the bushes, and they might have their spears ready, when it's really just Thug relieving himself in private. And the first person to laugh saves Thug's life. See, look, you're laughing. Good humans. Good job. You just saved Thug. We laugh to ease tension socially when unexpected things come up, assuring others that everything's fine. So if you're the type of person who nervously laughs in difficult situations, think of it as yourself trying to reassure others that it's going to be okay. It's a very pro-social response. Yes, we want to assure others that we're going to work this out, everything's fine, no need to throw spears. We're trying to form deeper shared connections between each other. Laughter is literally uncontrollable. It stems from that part of our brain, that lizard brain that we can't control, which is why you sometimes laugh at funerals. And I know you do because I read the scientific investigation. At a funeral, something somewhat out of the ordinary in day-to-day life has happened, which is a little ironic because it's almost definitely guaranteed for all of us, right? But still, our day-to-day routine has been interrupted by something threatening, frightening, and confusing. It's a grave violation of our expectations. And there's a part of our brain that, in our grief, desperately wants to let the people around us know it's okay. It's going to be okay, even when we're not sure that it will be. Our humor scientist, Robert Provine, says that only 10 to 20% of laughter, only 10 to 20%, is because of something identifiably funny. Interesting, huh? That almost all laughter, just the kind of laughter we do in everyday conversation, most of it appears to happen for social reasons. We do this for each other. The reason I became so intrigued by this theory is because it seems to explain scientifically why racist jokes are not funny. And lest you worry, no, I will not be giving a single example. I'll let you use your imaginations because of my dual commitment to both quality humor and being a decent human. But I will say that the same old tropes that racist humor tends to conjure up, those same old themes are so reliable and so repetitive and predictable. If you've heard one, you've almost heard them all. Because racism doesn't tend to generate fresh takes on anything. It's as old as could be. And it's also not harmless or benign to me, and probably most people in this room. According to the benign violation theory of humor, which we've just learned about, when someone laughs at a racist joke, what does that mean they're signaling to the people around them? It's okay. It's okay. It's harmless. They're not threatened. They're safe. We already know racism is morally abhorrent, but in most of its day-to-day manifestations that come up, it's also, and it doesn't get enough credit for this, racism's also very boring. We don't talk about this enough. The drudgery, the predictability of racism is very boring. It's not clever. There's nothing clever about racist commentary, or for that matter, sexist commentary, I've heard it all, or really anything else hateful. It's the Subway brand sandwich of human insight. It's the same handful of ingredients shuffled around, and however you rearrange them, it always tastes the same. And despite what we've been told in the past, that much bread is just not good for you. I'm sorry. And I appreciate laughing at edgy things. I do. I love to laugh about my own religion because I think our religion's hilarious. And I think having a healthy sense of humor about one's own faith serves as an important corrective to unexamined dogma or that deathly seriousness that could stifle creativity and inquisitiveness. It serves an important function of promoting community bonding, much as the choir does. That we can laugh about our religious beliefs, I think, is a good and healthy sign. Surely you've heard the joke about making UUs so mad that they burn a question mark in your lawn. Or, forgive me, choir, the joke about UUs being such bad singers because they're too busy reading ahead to see if they agree with the lyrics. Our choir has seen the lyrics before, evidently. Or my favorite of all time UU joke, which is about the Catholic priest, the rabbi, and the UU minister who, on their way to a faith-based conference, are all killed in a bus accident and they go to heaven. St. Peter ushers them into the waiting room and says, "Because you're clergy and you've devoted your life to religious inquiry, each of you will have a chance to have a half-hour interview with God." And they're sitting there, they're twiddling their thumbs, they're all a little bit worried about what we'll finally ask God now that we have the chance. They're racking their brains. And the Catholic priest says, "I've been training for this my whole life. I'll go first." The door swings open, and he steels himself and he goes in. The door shuts behind him. Now the rabbi and the UU minister are waiting, and they're checking their heaven watches, and 10 minutes goes by, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. They cannot wait. They're asking each other, what do you think he'll say? 25 minutes, and finally at 30 minutes, the door swings back open, and the priest comes out white as a sheet, and he says, "I never knew it was so complicated," and sits down. Now the other two look at each other and are like, "Oh Lord, literally, what do we do now?" And the rabbi says, "It's okay, I've been studying the Torah my whole life for this moment. I'll go next." The rabbi goes in, the door swings open, the door shuts behind him. And the Catholic priest is sitting there with his head in his hands, and the minister's twiddling her thumbs. 10 minutes goes by, 15, 25, and finally the door swings open and the rabbi staggers out looking shocked, and they say, "Well?" And he says, "Oh, I never knew it was so complicated," and sits down. Now the UU minister is terrified, but she steels herself, she gets her stole on straight. The door opens and she goes in, the door closes. The other two cannot wait to see how this goes. 10 minutes goes by, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour and a half. And they're thinking, wow, she really did it this time. And after 2 hours, the door swings open and God comes out and says, "I never knew it was that complicated." This is why I love this faith movement. But you know, while we can laugh about ourselves, and we can laugh about religion in general, I'd like to just provide a little guidance here. I think it's okay to make fun of ourselves, and I think it's okay most of the time to make fun of what people hate, like maybe the Westboro Baptist Church and their dumb signs, right? Yeah. But I think it's not okay, in general, to make fun of what people love, even if we don't agree with it. I've got some close Mormon friends who have since converted to Unitarian Universalism after the death of their child. When someone in their original church said to them, "How sad that you won't see him in heaven," they never came back and they went to a UU church. But since then, they've told me that the jokes they've heard there about their magic underwear have been deeply hurtful. My friend talked to me about when she finally got her temple garments, how much they meant to her, to feel her faith against her skin, to know that it was with her everywhere. That meant the world to her. And so those jokes about things that people love can be so unintentionally hurtful, even while they have trenchant theological commentary in them. And there is this good portion of religion that's devoted to unfunny, serious topics that are not benign and might not be okay, right? Like when bad things happen, why people die, why people die young, why people die thousands at a time, lined up in ditches. Were the soldiers there inherently good? When we come up short on those questions, the one that winds up looming, that gateway to nihilism, is often whether or not there's a reason why we're here. Now, if you're in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and you don't come across something on this earth that shakes your faith in universalism to its core, you might not be doing your job. And why have I strayed so far from laughter? Because I need to acknowledge that bad things happen all the time, that we can't always laugh at. And our religious movement does not explain those things away as being the will of God or everything happening for a reason. It's up to us to struggle in our lifetime with those things. And even for those of us who do believe that everything happens for a reason, sometimes there's just no way to spin tragedy into something benign or harmless. Looking at pictures of, say, the Holocaust can feel religiously overwhelming. The scope of it, the sheer scale, the senselessness. How does anyone who values life accept that our life can include what happened recently in New Zealand, for example? As ethical and religious people, we don't accept injustice and needless human suffering, and yet all of us must accept that within this lifetime, things will happen that we cannot control. That the things we care most about might be out of our hands. To rage against our own powerlessness, against the unfairness of it, and it is unfair. To allow ourselves to be consumed by bitterness, to get wrapped up in mourning our losses permanently, is something we can do for a little while. But to do it forever would be to miss the parts of human life that make living worth it. If we're alive, we have to live. That's our job. I found a photo of a priest and an imam laughing together, sharing a funny moment before an interfaith service on September 13th, 2001 in New York, 2 days after the September 11th attack. And I wondered, how could they laugh at this time? Being able to laugh when everything is going wrong around you is a way of releasing that tension, acknowledging the grave violation of our expectations of how human life should go, and coming to a place where not having the answers can be okay. It can be benign for now. A few years ago, I was at a funeral for the father of a friend who died of cancer. And one of the men who got up to speak talked about their last phone call together. He'd called not knowing that his friend was coming to the end, just to catch up. They hadn't talked in a while. And he said, it's springtime, which some of you might relate to. My allergies are killing me. I've been to the doctor. The Claritin wasn't working. Now I'm on the Zyrtec. It's just sneezing all day long. I can't focus on my work. It's just been hell. And he went on and on for a long time, until finally asking his friend, well, how have you been? At which point he said, actually, he had stopped treatment. That's why he called. This was it. He wanted to say goodbye. Now, the man who was speaking said he was briefly speechless and deeply ashamed, realizing with growing horror that his last conversation with his friend, his beloved friend, he'd be remembering forever as the time that he complained, prattling on needlessly, and then his friend died. And after some time, he got his wits about him and said, well, you don't have allergies, do you? And at the funeral, we all laughed too. And it's actually a pretty old joke. And he told us that if he hadn't remembered that joke, he would have had no idea what to say. But instead, he remembered laughing together when there was nothing else to be done. Humor helps us endure suffering by giving us a break, just a break for a little while, and reminding us that pain does not have the last word. I'm not saying that we should laugh our way through everything, but rather, because life involves impossible helplessness, spiritual wholeness must involve acceptance. Learning how to laugh again after tragedy is not a slap in the face of the suffering that you have known or witnessed. It's a way of living our fullest lives joyfully, faithfully, and communally, as long as we're alive, to the last phone call, the last conversation, connected and understanding and wanting to let each other know it's okay. It's okay.